All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Bat Olympics. Sorry for getting a little bit of a late start. This definitely took a lot of work to put together, and there were so many different cool bat species to research that I definitely got a bit caught up in all of it. But I'm excited that I'm here now, and thank you so much for, hanging in there. Hi, David. Nice to see you. Yep, just getting underway here. So, yeah, the Bat Olympics. Originally, I had this vision that for every continent, I was going to come up with like the most gymnastic bats or something like that. But it turns out that, that takes a lot more time than I was anticipating. So instead, what I decided to do was for the events that I ended up doing, I just chose 3 species from different continents to represent that event. So we're not going to be able to pick a winning continent at the end, but we are going to get to see a bunch of really cool bat behaviors highlighted. Thank you so much, David Howden, for the High Award, and to David Dunn for the Appreciate Award. It's great to see both of you. Oh, and also thank you to Tim Witham for, I think, the HAPS Olympics Award. Yep, that he gave before the start of this podcast. And also thank you, Tim, for subscribing. I really appreciate it. Your likes and your subscriptions really mean a lot. So, and thank you, David Dunn, for another award, HAPS Olympics. So I have to admit that I stole this sort of the format for this idea from Deanna Hooper, Dr. Deanna Hooper, who's a really cool cosmetology communicator. And she had a few days ago the Planet Olympics, where she had all the different planets competing against each other in the Olympics. And I watched her broadcast and I thought it was a really cool idea. So I decided to basically copy her with this bats idea. I will throw the link to her broadcast up in the chat in a little bit. But if you just look up Deanna Hooper Planet Olympics, I'm sure that you'll find it. So I'm also sort of copying her format where I'll describe a little bit about the different species involved in that event, and then you all will get to vote. So I'll put up that countdown again, and there will be 30 seconds where you can just say what your vote is. And we'll describe it. I'll describe it again when we get there. Yeah, David, you should definitely watch her replay. It was cool. I learned a lot about the different planets, and I found myself getting really emotionally caught up in it. Oh, I felt like Neptune should have won more medals, but what are you gonna do? Hi, Scott. Great to see you. Thanks for coming. Oh yeah, I called her a cosmetologist. I said cosmetologist instead of cosmologist, I guess. Ugh, drats. Yeah, she studies planets and space, not makeup and skin routines. And apologies, it looks like my connection is a little bit bad. Just wait here a minute to see if it comes back. Okay. Well, I think it looks like it's a little bit better right now. Gotcha that. Oh, thanks, Tim, for the Appreciate Award. That means a lot. So our first event, I guess I'll go up ahead and throw it up. Our first event is going to be gymnastics. And let me make this so that you can see it a little bit better. So our gymnastics event, one of the most gymnastic things that bats do is they have these cool flips and stuff like that. So we are gonna have 3 different species competing in the gymnastics category, and I'm gonna share a few videos with you. So if you bear with me for a moment. All right, so our first bat that we're going to see is, let me just get this. Sorry, there's a bit of a lag. Okay, so this first species that we're going to look at are these scientists that study bats landing. And this is a paper that came out a couple of years ago, and they studied bat landings. And so what they did is, you're going to see this bat, and it's a bat that's in a flight cage area. And you'll see all the little dots that the scientists put on its bats, but they wanted to understand how bats go about landing. And so if you watch the video, you can see it flip.
What we're really interested in is understanding how bats maneuver in the extreme way. So what the underlying question is, how do they maneuver their bodies to be head on the heels upside in order to land? So what we do is we take high-speed video.
I'm just going to play it again so you can see.
So what we're really interested in is understanding how bats maneuver in these extreme ways. So what the underlying question is how do they maneuver their bodies to be on the heel, their bodies heels upside down in order to land. So what we do is we take high-speed video.
All right, so that was a video of some scientists studying how bats land, which is this very gymnastic thing that they end up doing. And so, of course, this isn't unique to the bats that they were looking at in that study, but for one of the species that they did consider in that study was this species, which is the lesser dog-faced bat is what it's called. And that's a species that's found in Oceania. Apologies, there is like a tremendous lag that I'm experiencing here. But yeah, the lesser dog-faced fruit bat is one of the species that the scientists study to learn about how bats land. Gosh, is it? Yeah, David mentioned that it's pretty blurry and choppy. I was hoping that the connection would get a little bit better, but it doesn't seem like it is. The pic looks clear. Yeah, it sounds like maybe it's just my video. So I'll try to focus more so on just sharing images and stuff like that. So let me take my away for a moment. So this lesser dog-faced fruit bat is one of the bats that the scientists study to learn how bats can basically flip when they're landing. And that's a pretty cool gymnastics feat. So that's our first entrance for the gymnastics category. Our next entrant is, I'm going to share my screen again. So this is North America's entrant, the western red bat, and we're going to watch its gymnastics that it performs while it's eating. So that's a moth that you see. And then the bat does a somersault. So it's catching the moth in the membrane of its tail, the skin that stretches across its tail, and bringing it into its mouth. And while it's doing that, it's doing a somersault. Oh, actually, I see that I don't see the screen sharing notification. Could you guys all see that? It does say presenting. Nothing showing other than Hap's full screen. All right, I think I have to tell it to stop presenting and then start presenting again. I'll put my blurry face back up here in the meantime so y'all can see it. Yeah, I'm just experiencing a tremendous lag on my end. Every time I click something, it's like very behind. Okay, so now you should be able to see. All right, so you're gonna see a moth. So that white dot center of the screen is the moth, and the bat's just gonna come up and catch it in a tail membrane and flip around. So it's pretty cool because not only is this bat doing like nifty gymnastics feat, but it's actually hunting and eating at the same time. All right. So that's North America's entrant, the western red bat. And I'll throw up a picture of that guy. So that image we saw was pretty grainy, and it was in black and white because it was at nighttime. But the western red bat here is the species that we saw during those tremendous flipping events. Yeah, I agree that it was indeed pretty cool. And I think, this isn't the only species that does those somersaults while there's eating. There's also some other ones, but that's definitely like the best video that I could find online of it. All right, so we have our third and final bat to look at for this bat gymnastics category. And these bats are, instead of eating, they're just trying to avoid being eaten. So we're going to take a look at these bats that have to be pretty maneuverable in order to avoid being eaten by snakes that are hanging from a cave. Oh, and I think that I have to share the screen again. Yeah, David Howden says, clever. Moths need to evolve better defenses, and some have, of course. You're absolutely right. So for those of you who aren't aware, David Howden has a pretty cool Haps account here as well, where he shares videos of moths that he goes out and finds. So I always enjoy getting to see all the cool videos that he has of hunting for moths and whatnot. So here's the video of these bats that are avoiding being eaten in the caves.
Community in the heart of their local community found an area where bats did not ever. But also they saw that there are snakes living in that cave. Those snakes living in that cave. That snakes eat bats.
All right. So that was our final video. Let me just take that off the screen. Cool. So those are our 3 entrants. I'm going to put them all up on the screen here. So this is for the category of bat gymnastics. And after everything comes up here on the screen, I can start the voting. Looks like it's taking a while to bring them all up. All right. So I'm just going to take away, myself. Batnastics, David Dunn says. Yes, exactly. So these are our entrants. So we have the lesser dog-faced bat from Oceania that helped scientists learn about how bats land upside down. We have the western red bat from North America who did the somersaults to catch its food. And then we have bats such as the fringe-lipped bat in Central and South America that have to avoid these snakes that are hanging around trying to eat them at night. Especially some snakes that have started hanging out, around the outside of caves where all the bats are trying to leave for the night, and there's just tons and tons of snakes hanging down. Tim says his heart says North America, but his mind says Oceania. Yeah, it's a decision. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to throw up the CAPS countdown. And so while that's up, you'll have 30 seconds to type your vote. And then I'll just take it down. And so once you don't see the countdown anymore, don't type your vote anymore. You can type, whatever comes to you, whether it's the continent or the activity or the species of bat. I'll just mark it down either way. So don't be too worried about that. So you could say red bat or North American bat or bat flipping to catch its food. And I'll know what you mean by any of those. So I don't see any questions on the rules. All right, so I'm going to start the voting now. All right, so it looks like the winner taking home the gold is the western redbat of North America that flips to catch its food. I'll take away the rest. Yeah, so congrats. Congrats to the redbat. And in second place was the bats from Oceania, which were doing their really cool landings upside down. Awesome. All right. So our next event is the long distance run. And this is a topic that was suggested by David Howden. So thank you for that. And not only did David suggest the event, but he also pitched our first competitor in the event. So the first bat we have up is a European species. So this bat is called Nethusius's pipistrelle, and it's actually this species actually recently made news because of one particular individual bat who was first of all recorded making a record long distance migration. And so what people do is similar to birds, they'll put bands on bats so that it's a marker, it's a tag, so that you'll know if you find the same bat again later. And so there was a record where someone saw a bat with a band on it, and they were able to tell based on the location where the bat was banded in London, I believe, or at least it was banded by the London Zoo. And then the person who was observing this bat was in Russia, and so then they were like, oh wow, this bat traveled 12,000 miles, just over 2,000 kilometers, I'm told. But there's a sad component of this story, which is that the person, I believe the woman who found the bat had actually been injured. It had been attacked by a cat. And the bat was brought to a wildlife rehab facility, but unfortunately, it ended up dying. So this female bat, is being entered as a contestant post-mortem or in memorandum. 1,200 miles, yeah. And that was in response to David Dunn's question. So it's a little bit of a sad case, but it is kind of cool that we learned something cool, something for science. Before this species hadn't been recorded traveling that far. And just to give you an example of the kind of distances that we see bats traveling in Europe. So this image with the lines is showing the long distance movements of bats that have been recorded in Europe from some of these previous banding studies. And so we can see that a lot of them do travel pretty far, but there hadn't been one recorded traveling quite this far before, at least for this species. Yeah, Scott says that he keeps his cats indoors and they only kill bugs and only occasionally. One of my cats actually attacked a bat. She was an indoor cat, but the bat had gotten inside. And so I remember waking up in the middle of the night one night and I heard these like distressed bat noises. And I thought I was dreaming at first because, I'm a bat biologist. I go out and catch bats a lot of the time. So I thought I was having a dream about catching bats and this like angry bat was squeaking at me. But then as I woke up, I was really groggy. I was like, wait, that's a real bat squeaking. It's actually happening. And I went out and yeah, I found the bat had crawled under the washing machine when my cat tried to eat it. Oh yeah, Tim asks, do the bats migrate to breed or they're just following food or warm temperatures? So it depends on the situation. In Europe, they're oftentimes migrating because of the weather ultimately, and the weather also affects their food resources. So they need to migrate to avoid cold temperatures, and some of them go to like caves and stuff like that, and some of them just go farther south to more climatically controlled areas. But some of them are but also, when it's cold, then there's not like insects to eat and things like that. So it's a little bit of both. Yeah, I'm just skimming, making sure I didn't miss any questions real quick. But actually, on that note, Tim, I am going to bring up our second competitor for this long distance migration is a type of bat that migrates primarily just for food. So, some skimming. So flying foxes also migrate, but they migrate sort of, we call it like more of like a nomadic migration. They're kind of continually traveling year round. And this is because they eat fruit mainly. And so the different, like the trees that produce fruit are like producing fruit at different times of the year. And they're sort of just like traveling around, going from one area that has a bunch of fruit ripe to the next area and so on, just basically like following this fruit throughout the year, wherever it's most bountiful. And so these bats, I mentioned the previous bat. Okay, the previous bat had, sort of a one-way migration of 2,000 kilometers. These bats, these flying foxes, can travel over 6,000 kilometers over the course of a year, some of them. And so this is like in a big loop, basically. So these are much bigger species of bats. They're spending more of their time traveling. And so it's not really comparing apples to oranges, which is why you all get to vote on it instead of me just saying who's the winner. But these flying foxes of Oceania are our next entrant in the long distance category. And for our final bats in this category, let me find another North American entrant. So this was a study that came out a few years ago now, but they basically used satellite tags to put the satellite tags on bats, these little GPS trackers, and they were able to follow them around. And they followed this one individual bat called a hoary bat. He traveled, I'm just checking my notes for the distance. He traveled 1,000 kilometers circuit in about a month. So you can see in the arrows there, this bat, he was tagged in Western California, sort of northwestern California of the United States. And then he bounced up to Oregon and then back down to California. He even went over to Nevada. And this is all in the course of about a month. And this was kind of during the migration time, but he's not really migrating, right? Because he's just going in a big loop. So what they think this bat is doing is he's actually for mates. So bats in North America are a little bit unusual in that they actually mate, they have sex before the winter, and then the females store the sperm in them throughout the winter. And then when the spring comes, there's like delayed fertilization, and then the females become pregnant and whatnot. So this bat is basically like running all around looking for lady bats before winter comes. And we can see that he took quite the trek. He took a 1,000-kilometer road trip over the course of a month, looking for love, looking for ladies. So that brings us to a close for our entrance for the long distance run category. So I'm going to bring up all of our competitors here. Wild bat player, says David Dunn. Yeah. All right, we've got all of the bats up. So we have our North American hoary bat who is looking for love. We have our European pipistrelle bat who was killed tragically during her annual seasonal migration. And then we have the flying foxes of Oceania who spend the year traveling, trying to keep up with fruit, trying to keep up with their food resources. So I'm going to go ahead and start voting. Let me know who you vote for. All right, so if I'm interpreting that correctly, Scott, you're voting for the pipistrelle. Oh no, which means it's a tie break. It's a tie, I think. Oh no, it's not a tie. The flying foxes win. Um, so yeah, the flying foxes following the fruit take home the gold. I guess they do have the farthest absolute distance migration, so it's only fair. Um, but yeah, we have a winner. I think it's pretty cool. These bats are some of the most photogenic bats. They're used a lot in education and outreach because they have these like big puppy dog eyes, and that is actually because they eat fruit. So because they're eating fruit and not insects, they rely on their vision a lot more to find their food. And I think that that makes them cuter to people basically because we see the bat with the big eyes and we can like oftentimes relate to it more. David says he has to go. Thanks for joining. So I will confess that those are the only two events that I had time to like kind of do detailed entrance for. But I do want to mention a couple other honorary categories that we have. So one is this high dive event. And Deanna, who I mentioned earlier, who did the Planet Olympics, she suggested this topic. I kind of prompted her to because I wanted an excuse to cover fish eating bats. And a lot of people know there was fish eating bats, but there are. So I'm going to share another video with you all. Oh, thanks for the Appreciate Award, David. I appreciate it. I wish my internet were being so terribly slow right now. But yeah, this is a video from National Geographic of like there are several species of bats that eat like crustaceans or little like aquatic things like that. But some bats actually catch fish from the water. And apologies again, just every time I click, like I try to share my screen and then there's just like a tremendous delay before it pops up for me to do that. Okay, so I think you should be able to see the screen now. So we're going to watch this quick clip of the fishing bats.
Now, with the speed, timing, and artistry of an all-star football league receiver, she skims. She scores. Whoa, let's see that again. Truth be told, this mother bat is even more artful than NFL fan because she's using perfect timing to grab a prop. Doesn't want to be grabbed.
So yeah, that bat is catching fish, which I think is awesome. Stop presenting. Yeah, so I think that if we had voted on that, I could have looked and found, you know, there's some other little crustacean eating bats. There's a species like off the western coast of Mexico. That bat was Noctilio. She's down in more, and that's another problem with the bat Olympics is that like the bats is necessarily restricted continent. So some of these species encompass both like North and South America, for example. Scott says mammals better than fish. I have to admit, I agree. So she kind of gets she really just takes the gold on the diving event, I think. There's Noctilio bats. And our final event is dressage. Whoops, that's not dressage. Where did it go? Here it is. And I wonder, I actually didn't know what dressage was until a couple years ago, but dressage is basically making a horse do things that it doesn't want to do. It's getting on them and they do this weird kind of cloppy dance thing. And supposedly dressage was, yeah, it's riding a horse and having to do this, like, this kind of does this cloppy thing. And supposedly this is something horses used to be trained to do, like battle horses were trained to do this, to like trample the like fallen enemies below their hooves. But now it's like a very sort of like refined highfalutin horse event. Yeah, Mitt Romney owns a horse that does dressage, I believe. Yeah, exactly that type of thing. So you might be wondering, how could a bat do dressage or do anything like dressage? Well, I will tell you, yeah, I always think of it, Karen, as kind of like horse dancing. Yeah, it's like very synchronized, like fine movements. So I will tell you how bats do dressage. So for this, I am selecting vampire bats as just like the de facto winner. So if you look at this picture, you can see on top of this is a wild pig, a feral hog, and there's like a lighter spot on the top of it, and that is, can anyone guess what that is? Actually, I'm gonna leave it just for a moment and even add another image of what's happening. Bear, bat. Yeah, so these are bats that are riding on, I think both these pictures are feral hogs, but they'll also do this to horses or cows. These are vampire bats that are feeding on these animals at nighttime. Yeah, so I had to throw in vampire bats, and the wind dressage, of course, they take the gold for that, but I had to throw them in because this Wednesday at 4 Eastern time, we are interviewing along with my friend Christian Zasa. I'm interviewing a vampire bat biologist, someone who studies vampire bats exclusively. And it's actually going to be a HAPS takeover. So it's just in a few days. And we're interviewing Dr. Jerry Carter. So you can look him up. He has a lot of cool vampire bat videos. And these animals have really, really cool behaviors. Like they're very social with each other in their communities. There's also something about the terms of like, we as humans have these complicated social networks. And so we can learn a lot about how social networks work or potentially work by looking at these vampire bat social networks, which like are a little bit more, simplified than our social networks, which makes them easier to understand. So there's that kind of connection. But also there's like we as humans have a connection to these vampire bats because, well, you can see this one, they're eating pigs. They're a problem for farmers. They're a problem for people who have livestock or also chickens. The vampire bats will bother. So that is going to be coming up this Wednesday, and I don't have a link for that yet, but it's part of the Humans and Wildlife show that we do every Wednesday at 1 Pacific time, 4 Eastern time. So hopefully y'all will be able to come and catch us for that and learn about vampire bats on the special HAPS edition takeover version of the Humans and Wildlife show. So that's it for now. Thank you everyone for coming. Please, like, subscribe, share. I really appreciate y'all coming and keeping me entertained in the chats. And I will post the results of our Bat Olympics event. And with that, peace out. I'll see you all in a few days.